Humans quietly pulled back, forcing the Council to confront its fate ambassador. Daniel Harper stood in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles that rose toward the ceiling. Representatives from 40 different species sat in those seats. Some had scales, some had fur, and some looked like living crystals. Daniel was one of only 3 humans in the room. He held a data pad in his hands. The information on it was important. Very important. For 3 months, his team had been tracking unusual activity in the outer sectors of the galaxy. Ships were disappearing. Colonies were going silent. Something was wrong out there. Daniel stepped forward to the center of the chamber. A light shone down on him. All the alien eyes turned his way, though not all of them seemed interested. "Honored council members," Daniel began. His voice was calm and professional. "I come before you today with urgent information. We have detected a pattern of disappearances in sectors 7 through 12. 23 ships have vanished without sending distress signals. 4 colonies have stopped all communication. We believe an unknown threat may be operating in that region." He paused, waiting for questions or concerns. Instead, he heard whispers and saw several council members looking at their own devices. They were not paying attention. Councillor Vrex, a tall being with blue skin and 4 arms, finally spoke. "Ambassador Harper, humanity always sees threats. You worry too much. Perhaps these ships simply had equipment failures. Perhaps these colonies chose isolation. There is no proof of any real danger." Other council members nodded in agreement. Some even laughed quietly. Daniel felt frustration rise in his chest, but he kept his face neutral. "We have evidence suggesting otherwise. I request that the Council authorize a joint investigation team to examine these incidents." The vote was quick. 32 members voted against the proposal. Only 5 voted in favor. The rest did not vote at all. Daniel's request was denied. He walked back to his seat, his jaw tight. This was not the first time the Council had ignored human warnings. It was not even the 10th time. It happened again and again. Across the galaxy, Captain Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of Defense Station Guardian. The station orbited near the border between human space and Council territory. From her position, she could see everything that happened in the nearby sectors. Her second officer, Lieutenant Ben Cooper, approached with a report. "Captain, we are receiving another distress call. The Valorian colony on Praxis 4 is under attack by raiders." Lisa sighed. She had heard calls like this at least once a week for the past year. "Are any Valorian defense ships responding?" Ben shook his head. "No, ma'am. They are requesting human assistance. They say we are the closest military force." Lisa looked at the star map on the main screen. Praxis 4 was not in human territory. It was not covered by any defense treaty, yet the Valorians expected humans to come running just like always. "Send Commander Jake Peterson and his team," Lisa ordered. "Standard rescue protocol." Ben nodded and left to relay the orders. Lisa watched the map and felt tired. So very tired. Commander Jake Peterson led a team of 12 soldiers onto a transport ship. They had done this kind of mission hundreds of times. They flew to Praxis 4, landed near the colony, and engaged the raiders. The fight was short. The raiders were not well organized, and they fled when they realized human soldiers had arrived. Jake and his team helped repair damaged buildings and provided medical supplies to injured colonists. The Valorian governor met them at the landing pad as they prepared to leave. "You have our thanks," the governor said. The word sounded automatic, like something said out of habit rather than true gratitude. Jake nodded. "Stay safe." He did not expect any real appreciation. He never did. The transport ship lifted off and headed back to Defense Station Guardian. Jake sat in the back, removing his helmet. One of his soldiers, a young woman named Amy Brooks, sat across from him. "Do you ever wonder why we keep doing this?" Amy asked quietly. "They never help us. They never say thank you like they mean it. They just expect us to show up whenever they have a problem." Jake looked at her for a long moment. "We do it because it is the right thing to do. We do it because people need help. But what about us?" Amy pressed. "What about what we need?" Jake did not have a good answer for that. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter sat in a secure meeting room deep beneath the Capitol building. Around the table sat her most trusted advisors. There was General Paul Richards, head of Earth's military forces. There was Secretary of State Linda Hayes, who managed all diplomatic relations. There was Admiral Kevin Ross, who coordinated defense across all human territories. They had been meeting like this once a week for the past 6 months. Each meeting covered the same topics. The galaxy took from humanity constantly: resources, ships, soldiers, medical supplies, technology, and expertise flowed out to alien worlds every single day. In return, humanity received very little. Another vote against us in the council, Linda Hayes reported. They blocked our proposal to establish joint patrol routes in the neutral zones. They said it was unnecessary. Yet when pirates attack their ships in those same zones, they call us for help. General Richards leaned forward. Our forces are stretched thin, Madam President. We have soldiers stationed in 16 different sectors, protecting colonies that are not our own. We have ships patrolling trade routes that do not benefit our economy. We have medical teams responding to crises on worlds that refuse to share their own research with us. Admiral Ross added his own concerns. Morale is dropping. Our people see that they are not valued. They risk their lives for aliens who do not even acknowledge their sacrifice. We are losing good officers because they feel their service means nothing to the galaxy. President Carter listened to all of this. She had heard it before. She had felt it herself. For years, she had hoped that humanity's good deeds would earn them respect and friendship. Instead, they had only earned expectation and entitlement. We cannot continue like this, Helen said quietly. We are not the galaxy's servants. We are not obligated to solve every problem for species who will not even listen to our concerns. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what she was suggesting, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Helen looked at each of them. We will honor our treaties. We will protect our allies who have stood beside us, but we will no longer volunteer our aid. We will no longer rush to help those who take us for granted. We will focus on our own people, our own territories, and our own needs. Linda Hayes nodded slowly. It will send a message. It will send the right message, Helen replied. Let them learn what it means to stand on their own. Let them understand what they are losing. Over the next week, orders went out through all human military channels. They were not dramatic orders. There were no announcements or declarations. Ships simply began repositioning. Defense stations adjusted their patrol routes. Diplomatic staff stopped volunteering solutions in council meetings. Medical teams returned to human space. The galaxy did not notice at first. The change was quiet and gradual. Human ships still appeared in council space. Human diplomats still attended meetings, but something had shifted. Humanity had pulled back, and soon, the galaxy would feel the consequences. Daniel Harper sat in his office at the council headquarters. He had just received his new orders from Earth. He read them twice to make sure he understood. Then he leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a small smile. Finally, things were going to change. Outside his window, ships moved through space. Most of them were alien vessels going about their daily business. But if someone looked closely, they would notice something different. The human ships were heading home. 3 months had passed since humanity quietly pulled back. The change happened so slowly that most of the galaxy did not notice at first. Human ships still traveled through council space. Human diplomats still attended meetings. But something was different. On the border world of Kelton Prime, 2 alien species faced each other with weapons drawn. The Zethians and the Morphic had argued over mining rights for years. Usually, human negotiators would arrive within days to mediate. They would sit both sides down, work through the disagreements, and find a solution. Everyone expected that to happen this time, too. The Zethian commander sent a message to the nearest human diplomatic station. He explained the situation and requested immediate assistance. The response came back within an hour. It was polite and professional. It stated that humanity had no treaty obligation with either species regarding territorial disputes. It wished both parties well in finding a peaceful resolution. The Zethian commander read the message 3 times. He could not believe it. Humans always helped with these problems. Why would they refuse now? Without human mediators, the dispute grew worse. Threats turned into shooting. Small fights turned into bigger battles. Within 2 weeks, both sides had suffered casualties. The situation that humans could have solved in 3 days had become a crisis. Far across the galaxy, the Thex Consortium faced a different kind of emergency. A plague had appeared on their agricultural world of Thexia 7. The disease spread quickly through the population. The Thex medical facilities were not advanced enough to handle it. They had always relied on human medical ships when serious outbreaks occurred. The consortium sent an urgent distress call. They marked it as Priority 1, which meant lives were at risk. They expected to see human medical vessels arrive within 48 hours, just like always. Instead, they received a message. It explained that humanity had no treaty requiring medical intervention in Thex space. It included some basic medical data that might help their own doctors. It expressed sympathy for their situation. But no ships were coming. The Thex health minister stared at the message in shock. This cannot be real, she said to her staff. Humans always come. They saved us during the Crimson Fever outbreak. They helped us when the toxic spill contaminated our water.
Why would they abandon us now?
No one had an answer. The plague continued to spread while Thex doctors struggled to find a cure on their own. At the Galactic Council headquarters, Counselor Vrex of the Quillari species sat in his private office reviewing reports. Vrex had served on the council for 20 years. He prided himself on noticing patterns that others missed. Lately, he had noticed something strange about human behavior. Humans still attended every council session. Ambassador Daniel Harper still presented reports and participated in discussions. But humans no longer offered solutions. They no longer volunteered their ships or resources. When other council members proposed initiatives, humans simply voted and remained quiet. They did not suggest improvements or offer assistance like they used to. Vrex pulled up economic data from the past 3 months. What he saw concerned him. Human cargo ships had reduced their routes through council space by 30%. Human trading posts had closed in 4 sectors. Human defense patrols had withdrawn from border regions. He called his assistant, a young Quillari named Ren. I need you to analyze all human activity in council space over the past 6 months. Compare it to the previous 5 years. I want to see every change, no matter how small. Ren worked for 2 days. When he returned with his findings, his expression was troubled. Sir, the pattern is clear. Humans are pulling back from nearly every volunteer activity. They still fulfill their treaty obligations, but nothing more. They have withdrawn from 23 peacekeeping positions. They have closed 15 aid stations. They have recalled 30% of their diplomatic support staff. Vrex felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Why did no one notice this sooner? Because they did it quietly, Ren explained. There were no announcements, no declarations. They simply stopped doing the extra things they always did. Most species assumed humans were just busy with other matters. No one realized it was intentional. Captain Lisa Monroe stood on the bridge of Defense Station Guardian watching her monitors. A shipping lane that human vessels had patrolled for 12 years was now completely unprotected. She watched as merchant ships from various species tried to navigate the route without human escorts. 3 pirate vessels appeared on the edge of the scanner. They moved toward a cargo convoy. The convoy sent out distress calls. Several of those calls were directed at Defense Station Guardian. Lieutenant Ben Cooper looked at Lisa. Captain, should we respond? Lisa checked her orders. The shipping lane was outside human territory. There was no treaty requiring its protection. Negative. That is not our responsibility. Advise the convoy to contact their own governments for assistance. Ben sent the message. Lisa watched as the pirate vessels closed in on the convoy. She felt no satisfaction in this moment. She had spent her entire career protecting innocent people. Watching ships get attacked while she did nothing felt wrong, but she understood why it was necessary. The galaxy needed to learn. Ambassador Daniel Harper attended another council session. The main topic was trade route security. Several council members complained about the increase in pirate activity. They talked about how shipping losses had risen by 40% in the past 3 months. One counselor, a being named Trexus from the Pelthan worlds, turned to Daniel. Ambassador Harper, surely humanity can spare some patrol ships to help secure these routes. You have the largest fleet. You have the best training. This would be a simple matter for your people. Daniel looked at Trexus calmly. Counselor, humanity maintains patrols in our own territory and along routes covered by our defense treaties. If the Pelthon worlds wish to negotiate a new treaty for mutual defense, our government would be happy to discuss terms. Trexus seemed surprised by this answer. But you have always helped before. You never required treaties for such things. That was before, Daniel replied. Things are different now. The council chamber filled with whispers. Many members exchanged confused glances. They did not understand what had changed or why. On the agricultural world of Deneb 3, a refugee crisis was developing. A nearby star had gone unstable, forcing the evacuation of 2 colonies. Millions of refugees needed transportation to safe worlds. In the past, human transport ships would have arrived within a week to help move people. The refugee processing centers on Deneb 3 were built with that expectation. But no human ships came. The refugees kept arriving faster than local vessels could move them. The processing centers became overcrowded. Food supplies ran low. Medical facilities could not handle the numbers. The situation grew desperate. The governor of Deneb 3 sent increasingly urgent messages to Earth. Each message received the same polite response. Humanity sympathized with their situation, but had no treaty obligation to provide transport. Perhaps other council members could assist. The problem was that other council members did not have enough transport ships. For decades, they had allowed their own civilian transport infrastructure to shrink because human ships were always available. Now they discovered how dependent they had become. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter received daily reports about the growing problems across Council space. Each report showed another crisis that humanity would have solved in the past. Some of her advisors expressed concern. "Madam President," Secretary Linda Hayes said during one meeting, "the situation is becoming serious. People are suffering. Should we reconsider our position?" Helen looked at the reports spread across the table. She felt the weight of each crisis. But she also remembered years of being taken for granted, years of having her people risk their lives for aliens who did not even thank them, years of being ignored and dismissed by the Council. "No," Helen said firmly, "we are not causing these problems. We are simply not solving them anymore. The galaxy must learn to stand on its own. If we return to the old ways now, nothing will change. They will continue to take us for granted." Admiral Kevin Ross spoke up. "We are receiving many offers, Madam President. Council members are proposing trade deals, technology exchanges, and political concessions. They are promising to support human initiatives in the Council. They want us to resume our previous activities." Helen considered this. "Are any of them offering true partnerships? Equal relationships based on mutual respect?" Kevin shook his head. "No, ma'am. They are offering payment for services. They still see us as a resource to be bought, not as equals to be respected." "Then we continue as we are," Helen decided. "Let the situation develop further. They need to understand what they lost before they can appreciate what we offered." In the Council chambers, an emergency session was called. The topic was the growing list of crises across Council space. Members argued and blamed each other for problems they had always relied on humans to solve. The chamber was full of angry voices and accusations. Councillor Vrex watched it all with growing certainty. He knew exactly what was happening. Humanity had withdrawn, and the galaxy was finally seeing how much it had depended on them. The question now was whether the Council would learn from this lesson or let pride destroy them. 6 months had passed since humanity began its quiet withdrawal. What started as minor inconveniences had grown into major crises. Systems that had relied on human support for generations were failing. The galaxy was beginning to understand what it had lost. On the Pelthon homeworld, Minister of Resources Kelvan stood before an emergency assembly. His people faced a serious problem. For 30 years, human mining operations had provided 40% of the rare minerals that powered Pelthon technology. Those minerals were essential for their computers, their ships, and their medical devices. The mining contracts with humanity had been favorable to the Pelthon. Very favorable. Humans had charged low prices and maintained steady supply. Kelvin had never questioned why humans were so generous. He had simply accepted it as the natural order of things. Now those contracts were expiring, and humanity had declined to renew them under the old terms. The new terms being offered were standard market rates. Fair rates, but they were 3 times higher than what the Pelthon had been paying. "We cannot afford these prices," one assembly member shouted. "Our economy will collapse." Kelvan knew it was true. The Pelthon economy had been built on the assumption that cheap human minerals would always be available. They had never developed their own mining infrastructure. They had never sought alternative suppliers. Why would they? When humans provided everything they needed. "We must negotiate," Kelvin said. "We must convince the humans to return to the old arrangements." But deep down he knew the truth. The humans were not going to return. The old arrangements had been a gift, and the Pelthon had never appreciated it. In the shipping lanes between Sectors 9 and 14, chaos ruled. Pirates and raiders operated freely without fear. For years, human patrol fleets had kept these criminals in check. The pirates had been careful, only striking when they thought they could escape. Now, with human ships gone, they attacked with confidence. A merchant convoy from the Brenix Corporation limped into port with half its ships destroyed. The convoy master, a veteran trader named Gorvin, reported to his superiors with barely controlled anger. "Where were the patrols?" he demanded. "Where were the defense ships? We sent distress calls for 2 hours while raiders tore us apart. No one came." His supervisor, a tired-looking Brenix named Velna, could only shake her head. "The human patrols are gone. Our own government does not have enough ships to cover these routes. We are on our own now." Gorvin slammed his hand on the desk. "Then we need to hire human escorts. We need to pay them to protect our ships." "We tried," Velna replied quietly. "The humans said they would be happy to provide security services. They sent us a price quote. It was 10 times what we can afford." 10 times? Gorvin could not believe it. But they used to patrol for free. Yes, Velna said. They did. And we never once thanked them for it. On the world of Krev Unity, the refugee crisis had reached a breaking point. 15 million displaced people crowded into temporary camps. Food was running out. Disease was spreading. The local government had no way to transport so many people to permanent homes. Governor Lennis stood in the largest camp, surrounded by desperate families. Children cried from hunger. Adults stared at him with hollow eyes. He had promised them help was coming. He had been so sure that human transport ships would arrive, just like they always had. But the humans did not come. They sent medicine and some food supplies, which was more than most species offered. But they sent no ships. No transport, no solution to the crisis. Lennis had tried everything. He had contacted every council member. He had begged for assistance. A few species sent small ships that could carry a few hundred people. It was not nearly enough. The Mirren species had tried to help. They were a young civilization, only recently admitted to the council. They had been inspired by humanity's example and wanted to show the same generosity. They sent their entire civilian fleet to help transport refugees. But the Moran did not have humanity's experience. They did not have the same level of organization. Their ships broke down. Their logistics failed. They managed to move 50,000 refugees before their fleet had to return home for repairs. It was a noble effort, but it showed how difficult the work truly was. Governor Lennis realized something as he watched the Mirren ships depart. Humanity had made this work look easy. They had handled crises like this dozens of times each year, and they had done it so smoothly that everyone assumed it was simple. No one had understood the skill and resources required. At the Galactic Council headquarters, sessions had become tense and bitter. Members who had been allies for decades now argued constantly. Old disputes that had been settled years ago were brought up again. Accusations flew across the chamber. Councillor Vrex watched it all with deep concern. For 20 years he had served on this council. He had seen disagreements before, but he had never seen it this bad. The council was falling apart. He finally understood why. Humanity had not just provided ships and resources. They had provided something more valuable. They had provided stability. Human diplomats had smoothed over conflicts before they could escalate. Human mediators had found compromises that satisfied everyone. Human presence had been the glue holding the council together. Without that presence, without that steady hand, the council was revealing its true nature. It was not a unified body working for the common good. It was a collection of competing interests held together by convenience and habit. Vrex stood and requested permission to speak. The chamber fell quiet. He was respected among the council members, even by those who often disagreed with him. My fellow councillors, Vrex began, I have been analyzing the events of the past 6 months. I have identified the source of our current problems. Every eye turned to him. Many members leaned forward, eager to hear his solution. The source of our problems is us, Vrex said simply. We have spent decades taking humanity for granted. We accepted their help as if it was our right. We dismissed their concerns. We voted against their interests. We treated them as servants rather than equals. Angry voices erupted across the chamber. Several councillors shouted denials. Others demanded that Vrex retract his statement. But Vrex continued, his voice rising above the noise. Now humanity has stepped back and we see the truth. We are not as capable as we believed. We are not as self-sufficient as we pretended. We built our civilization on the foundation of human generosity, and we never once acknowledged it. Ambassador Daniel Harper sat in his seat, watching Vrex speak. He had not expected this. Most council members were still in denial about the situation. But Vrex saw the truth clearly. The vote was called to officially request that humanity resume its previous level of involvement. The measure passed by a narrow margin. A formal request was drafted and sent to Earth. President Helen Carter read the request in her office. It was polite and professional. It acknowledged that certain problems had arisen. It expressed hope that humanity would continue its tradition of supporting the galactic community. But it offered nothing in return. No apology, no recognition of past mistakes. Just an expectation that humans would return to serving the galaxy. They still do not understand. Helen said to Admiral Kevin Ross. They think this is about them having problems. They do not see that this is about respect. Should we respond? Kevin asked. Send a brief reply, Helen decided. Thank them for their communication. Inform them that humanity remains committed to all existing treaty obligations. Say nothing more, the reply was sent. It answered nothing. It promised nothing. It simply acknowledged that the message had been received. In Council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. A minor war broke out between two member species. Trade routes collapsed. Colonies struggled without support. And for the first time in decades, Council members had to face their problems without humanity there to save them. Captain Lisa Monroe watched it all from Defense Station Guardian. Ships fled from combat zones. Distress calls filled the communication channels. Her crew looked to her for orders that never came. "It is hard to watch," Lieutenant Ben Cooper said quietly. Lisa nodded. "Yes, but it is necessary. They need to learn what it means to stand on their own. They need to understand what we gave them. And if they do not learn," Ben asked, "what if they just blame us for their problems?" Lisa had no answer for that. She could only hope that eventually, the galaxy would understand. But hope was becoming harder to maintain with each passing day. On Earth, military analysts tracked every crisis. They measured the economic damage. They calculated the lives affected. The numbers grew larger each week. Some people questioned whether humanity was doing the right thing. Some argued that they should help regardless of being appreciated. But President Helen Carter held firm. This was not about punishment. This was about teaching a lesson that the galaxy desperately needed to learn. The question was whether they would learn it in time, or whether their pride would destroy them first. 9 months into the withdrawal, everything changed. The crisis that Ambassador Daniel Harper had warned about finally arrived. The threat he had tried to tell the Council about was now real and undeniable. The Dravek came without warning. They were a species no one had encountered before. Their ships appeared at the edges of Council space, moving with clear hostile intent. They did not send messages. They did not make demands. They simply attacked. The first colony to fall was on the Outer Rim, a small mining settlement called Orvek Station, home to 50,000 people from various species. The Dravek ships arrived in the middle of the night cycle. By morning, the entire station was destroyed. There were no survivors. News of the attack spread quickly through Council space. At first, many members thought it was an isolated incident. Perhaps pirates with new ships. Perhaps a mistake. But then the Dravek hit another colony, and another. Within 2 weeks, 7 worlds had been attacked. The Council called an emergency military session. Defense coordinators from every member species gathered to assess the threat. What they discovered was frightening. The Dravek had powerful weapons. Their ships were fast and heavily armored. Their tactics were aggressive and effective. General Tarnix of the Valorian Defense Force stood before the assembly with grim news. "Our forces engaged the Dravek at Helion 7. We lost 6 ships before we were forced to retreat. Their technology is advanced. Their crews are skilled. This is not a small raiding party. This is an organized military force." Silence filled the room. For decades, the galaxy had been at peace. Small conflicts, yes. Border disputes, certainly. But no real wars. Council military forces had become comfortable. They had focused on policing and peacekeeping, not actual combat. "We need to organize a defense," someone said. "We need to pool our resources and push them back." But as they examined their combined military strength, the truth became clear. The Council's own forces had become weak. Not because they lacked ships or weapons, but because they lacked experience and coordination. For 30 years, whenever a real military threat appeared, humans had handled it. Council forces had never needed to develop serious combat capabilities. Admiral Kevin Ross sat in a secure bunker on Earth, watching the same intelligence reports. He saw the Dravek ships. He analyzed their attack patterns. His officers provided estimates of what it would take to stop them. "We could handle them," Kevin said to President Helen Carter. "Our fleet has the strength and experience. We could push the Dravek back in a coordinated campaign." "I know," Helen replied. She looked tired. The past 9 months had weighed heavily on her. But if we step in now, nothing will change. The Council will be grateful for a month, then go back to taking us for granted. We need to wait. "People are dying," Kevin said quietly. "I know," Helen repeated. Her voice was heavy with that knowledge. "But more people will die in the future if we do not teach this lesson now. The galaxy must learn to defend itself." Captain Lisa Monroe received urgent orders. Defense Station Guardian was to withdraw deeper into human space. The border regions were becoming too dangerous. All human military assets were to pull back and focus on protecting human worlds. Lisa understood the strategic reasoning, but it was still difficult to give the order. As her station moved away from its position, she watched the border sectors on her monitors. She saw Council ships trying to organize defenses. She saw colonies evacuating. She saw the chaos that the Dravik attacks had created. Lieutenant Ben Cooper stood beside her. "We could make a difference out there, Captain. One human fleet could turn the tide." "One fleet," Lisa agreed. "But then what? We win the battle for them and they learn nothing. We have to let them face this themselves." At the Galactic Council, panic had set in. Emergency sessions were called every day. Members shouted at each other. Some blamed the Council leadership for not preparing better defenses. Some blamed humanity for abandoning them. Some simply blamed each other. Councillor Vrex tried to bring order to the chaos. "We need to focus on solutions, not blame. We need to organize our military forces. We need a unified command structure. We need a strategy." But creating those things was harder than anyone expected. Different species had different military traditions, different command structures, different tactical doctrines. For years, human military coordinators had helped smooth over these differences. Now, without that expertise, the Council forces could barely work together. A desperate idea emerged. The Council would ask humanity for help, not just request it politely, actually ask. Some members objected. Their pride would not allow them to admit they needed humanity. But as more colonies fell to the Dravik, pride became less important than survival. The formal request was drafted. It was different from the previous message. This one acknowledged the gravity of the situation. It admitted that the Council could not handle the threat alone. It asked humanity to provide military assistance against the Dravik invasion. Ambassador Daniel Harper received the message and forwarded it to Earth. Then he waited. He knew this was a turning point. How humanity responded would shape the future of the galaxy. President Helen Carter convened her full cabinet. They discussed the request for hours. Some advisors argued they should help immediately. The Dravik were a real threat. Innocent people were suffering. This was not the time for lessons about respect. Others argued they should continue to stay back. The Council was finally facing the consequences of its choices. If humanity stepped in now, the old patterns would simply repeat. Secretary of State Linda Hayes offered a middle ground. "We should help, but on our terms. We need to make clear that this is the beginning of a new relationship, not a return to the old one." Helen considered this carefully. She thought about all the years of being dismissed and taken for granted. She thought about the soldiers like Commander Jake Peterson who had risked their lives without recognition. She thought about the colonies that called for help only to ignore human advice. But she also thought about her principles. Humanity had always helped because it was right, not because of thanks. That core value had not changed. "We will help," Helen finally decided. But first the Council must acknowledge the truth. They must publicly recognize how much they depended on humanity. They must commit to building a real partnership based on equality, and they must demonstrate that commitment with concrete actions. The response was sent to the Council. It stated that humanity was willing to provide military assistance against the Dravik. But there were conditions. The Council must issue a formal statement acknowledging their past mistakes. They must agree to renegotiate all major treaties with human input. They must commit to developing their own military capabilities so they would not be dependent in the future. And they must treat humanity as an equal partner, not as a service provider. The Council chamber erupted when the message was read. Some members were outraged. They saw it as humanity making demands during a crisis, taking advantage of the situation. But Councillor Vrex stood once again. His voice cut through the noise. "Everything humanity has asked for is reasonable. Everything they have said is true. We did take them for granted. We did treat them as servants. We did build our security on their generosity without acknowledging it. If we cannot admit these simple truths, then we deserve whatever fate awaits us." The debate went on for hours. Pride fought against survival. Some members refused to accept the terms. But slowly the practical voices won out. The Dravik were not going to stop. Council forces alone could not stop them. Humanity was offering help, but they were also offering something more valuable. They were offering a chance to build something better. The vote was called. It was not unanimous. Some members voted against it even knowing the consequences, but the majority voted in favor. The Council would accept humanity's conditions. A formal statement was drafted. It acknowledged that the Council had failed to appreciate humanity's contributions. It recognized that their relationship had been one-sided. It committed to building a new partnership based on mutual respect and equality. It was not an easy statement for proud species to make, but it was necessary. When Ambassador Daniel Harper read the statement, he felt a complicated mix of emotions. Satisfaction that the lesson had been learned, sadness that it had required so much suffering, hoped that things could truly be different now. He sent a message back to Earth with a simple recommendation. Accept their acknowledgement. Begin the process of helping. But do not forget what was learned here. President Helen Carter read the Council's statement. She read it multiple times, looking for sincerity, looking for real understanding. She found it. The words were not perfect, but they were honest. Contact Admiral Ross, she ordered. Tell him to begin military coordination with Council forces. We have a war to win. The message went out through all human military channels. After 9 months of standing back, humanity was returning. But this time they were returning as equals, as partners, not as saviors who would be forgotten once the crisis passed. The galaxy was about to learn what true cooperation looked like. Admiral Kevin Ross stood in the command center of Earth's military headquarters. Around him, holographic displays showed the entire theater of war. Red markers indicated Dravik positions. Blue markers showed Council forces. Green markers represented human fleets that were now moving to join the fight. This was different from the old days. In the past, humans would have simply taken command and solved the problem. Now they were working with Council forces as partners. It was more complicated. It required more communication. But it was the right way. General Tarnix of the Valorian Defense Force appeared on the main screen. He looked exhausted but determined. Admiral Ross, my forces are ready to coordinate with yours. What are your orders? Kevin shook his head. Not my orders, General. Our strategy. We need to work together on this. What is your assessment of the Dravik positions? Tarnix seemed surprised by the question. He had expected humans to simply tell him what to do. The Dravik have established forward bases in 3 sectors. They are using hit-and-run tactics against our supply lines. We have not been able to predict their movements. My analysts have identified a pattern, Kevin said. We think they are preparing for a major push into Sector 12. If we coordinate our forces, we can set a trap. They spent the next hour planning together. It was slower than if humans had just done it themselves, but it was building something more important than efficiency. It was building trust and capability. Captain Lisa Monroe led her battle group toward the front lines. Defense Station Guardian had been converted into a mobile command platform. Around her, 20 Council ships flew in formation with 15 human vessels. It was the first truly integrated fleet that anyone could remember. On her bridge, officers from 4 different species worked together at various stations. A Valorian weapons officer, a Quillari navigation specialist, a Thex communications operator, and human crew members alongside them all. Approaching Sector 12, Lieutenant Ben Cooper reported. Dravik ships detected ahead. Lisa studied the tactical display. The enemy formation was strong, but the combined fleet had advantages. All ships maintained formation. Wait for my signal. She opened a channel to the Council ship commanders. This is Captain Monroe. We execute the plan on my mark. Remember your training. We move together or not at all. The battle began exactly as they had planned. The Dravik ships moved to attack what appeared to be a weak Council formation. But it was bait. When the enemy committed to the attack, human ships emerged from concealment. At the same time, Council forces that had seemed to be retreating suddenly turned and pressed forward. The Dravik were caught in a coordinated strike from 3 directions. Their ships were powerful, but they could not handle the organized assault. Within 2 hours, the enemy fleet was destroyed or fleeing. Lisa watched the battle results with satisfaction. All ships report status. The responses came in one by one. Some damage, some casualties. But it was a clean victory. More importantly, it was a victory that both humans and Council forces had achieved together. Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, the mood had shifted dramatically. The joint victory in Sector 12 had proven that cooperation could work. More battles followed. Some were won, some were harder fights. But with each engagement, Council forces learned and improved. Councillor Vrek stood before the Assembly with a progress report. The combined fleets have pushed the Dravik back from 7 occupied systems. Our losses are within acceptable ranges. The coordination between human and Council forces continues to improve. He paused, looking around the chamber. But we must remember that this success is only possible because we finally chose to work together as equals. Humanity is not saving us. We are saving ourselves, with humanity standing beside us as partners. The difference in attitude was remarkable. Council members who had once dismissed human concerns now listened carefully to human advisors. Species that had once assumed human help would always be available now worked to develop their own capabilities. On the Thex homeworld, the plague that had devastated their population was finally under control. Thek's doctors had developed a cure with guidance from human medical experts. The humans had not sent ships to solve the problem. Instead, they had provided data, advice, and encouragement. The Theks had done the hard work themselves. The Theks health minister stood in her laboratory looking at the cure they had created. "We could have done this 9 months ago," she said to her assistant. "We had the capability all along. We just never believed we could do it without humans doing it for us." That realization was spreading across the galaxy. Species were discovering strengths they did not know they had. They were solving problems they had always assumed required human intervention. They were becoming self-reliant. Governor Lennis of Deneb 3 managed the refugee crisis using a new coalition of species. The Mirren sent transport ships again, but this time they coordinated with Valorian logistics experts and Krillari resource managers. It was not as smooth as when humans had handled everything, but it worked. The refugees found new homes. The camps closed. The crisis ended. Lennis realized that the solution had not required human ships at all. It had required cooperation between species that had never worked together before. That cooperation would never have happened if everyone had simply waited for humans to fix everything. The war against the Dravik reached its final phase. The enemy had been pushed back to their original territory. The question now was whether to pursue them further or establish a defensive line. President Helen Carter participated in a council of war that included leaders from every major council species. It was the first time such a meeting had been held with all parties as equals. "The Dravik are no longer a threat to our space," General Tarnix reported, "but they could rebuild and attack again in the future." Ambassador Daniel Harper offered the human perspective. "We recommend establishing a joint patrol system along the border. Not a human patrol system that others rely on, a truly joint system where every species contributes equally." The proposal was accepted. Plans were drawn up for a permanent defense network. Every council member would contribute ships, personnel, and resources. Humanity would be part of it, but not the entire foundation of it. In the months that followed, the galaxy continued to change. The Pelthon developed their own mining operations and negotiated fair trade agreements with humanity. The Brennix Corporation hired human security escorts at market rates and also invested in their own defense ships. The Krev Unity built their own transport fleet, with human engineers providing training and advice. The old dependency was being replaced by genuine cooperation. It was not perfect. There were still disputes and disagreements. But now those conflicts were resolved through honest negotiation, rather than expecting humans to mediate everything. Captain Lisa Monroe returned to Defense Station Guardian, now positioned back at its original location. But her role had changed. Instead of being the emergency responder for every nearby crisis, she was the coordinator for a sector defense network that included ships from 6 different species. Lieutenant Ben Cooper approached her on the bridge. "Captain, we just received a distress call from a colony in Sector 8. Raiders are attacking. 3 Council defense ships are already responding. They are asking if we want to join them." Lisa smiled. "They are asking, not demanding. They are already responding themselves, not waiting for us. Send a message that we will join them. Then contact the Council ships and coordinate our approach." That was the difference. The galaxy no longer waited for humans to save them. They acted on their own and invited humanity to stand beside them. Ambassador Daniel Harper attended a council session where new treaties were being voted on. These were fair treaties negotiated between equals. Human proposals were seriously considered. Human concerns were genuinely addressed. When votes were taken, they were honest votes rather than predetermined dismissals. After one particularly productive session, Councillor Vrex approached Daniel in the corridor. "Ambassador Harper, I wanted to thank you personally, not just for humanity's military assistance, but for the lesson you taught us. It was a hard lesson. Many people suffered because of it, but it was necessary." Daniel nodded. "We never wanted people to suffer. We just wanted to be respected." "You have earned far more than respect," Vrex replied. "You have earned genuine partnership. The galaxy is stronger now because you had the courage to step back and let us learn to stand on our own." On Earth, President Helen Carter gave a speech to her people. She explained what the withdrawal had accomplished. She acknowledged the difficulty of watching others struggle while staying back. She honored those who had served during the hardest months. "We did not abandon the galaxy," she said. "We taught it to be strong. We showed them that they had the capability to solve their own problems. And now we stand with them as true partners in a way that was never possible before." The applause was long and genuine. Humanity had made a difficult choice, and it had worked. Years later, historians would look back on this period as a turning point. The time when the galaxy stopped being divided into those who gave and those who took. The time when real cooperation replaced convenient dependency. The time when humanity taught its greatest lesson, not through intervention but through restraint.